So we should be good to go now. Welcome everybody to our monthly professional development webinar from the Religion Communicators Council. We are very excited today to have with us Allison Ralph, Dr. Allison Ralph, who's the founder and principal of Cohesion Strategy. Um, Before we begin our seminar today, just a quick reminder about who we are as the Religion Communicators Council. The RCC is a professional organization of people who work for and on behalf of different faiths and faith-inspired groups around the nation. We take great pride in the fact that we are truly uh, a an interfaith organization. We do have everything under the sun. As far as faith-based groups are concerned, everything I usually say from the Sikhs to the Scientologists, um, and from the Methodists to the Mormons. I mean, we have everything. And we really, really appreciate the fact that we are an interfaith organization. We love to learn from each other. We love to grow with one another, and we love to hear from very interesting people like Dr. Ralph. Um, the RCC also covers all spans and all types of communication work, everything from public relations to newsletters to video production. And so, with that kind of melting pot, it's really good to talk about things that kind of touch on everything that we do. And that's what Allison or Dr. Ralph is doing with us today. Um, as I'm sure you've noticed, more and more we see that headlines in the United States and around the world are spotlighting division and distrust. And faith-based communicators, we stand at the front lines and we're trying to tell a different story. We're trying to tell a story of one that makes room for all. And so we're here to explore how the narratives we share about who belongs can either deepen polarization or open the door to genuine pluralism and social cohesion. Dr. Ralph, this is what she thinks about all the time. She has over 20 years of experience in strategy research, nonprofit, and philanthropic leadership, but particularly looking at religious pluralism and social cohesion. She previously worked at the Aspen Institute, where she served as Associate Director of the Religion and Society Program and Director of its Religion and Philanthropy Initiative. Um, and now she's working on identity, social cohesion, democratic norms, and she is trying to reshape the way we think about our values and the language that holds communities together. As I said, she's the founder and principal of Cohesion Strategy. So she's here to tell us about her work today and to give us some insights to how we might improve our own communication skills. I will turn the time over to Dr. Ralph. We'll let her speak for however long she wants to speak, then we'll open it up for Q&A. So take good notes, and if you have questions that you think of along the way, just go ahead and drop them into the chat, and we'll have a nice Q&A session afterwards. And with that, I will turn the time over to you, Dr. Ralph.
Thank you, Ryan, so much. It's really a pleasure to be with you and with all of y'all here at the Religion Communicators Council. I'm going to share screen and get rolling. Okay, so this is me, Allison. I run Cohesion Strategy. Primarily, we support pluralistic solutions, pluralistic organizations, including lots of faith-based, multi-faith, or secular organizations otherwise playing in the religion sandbox. I believe that a community like a murmuration of starlings sticks together when each member finds more joy in it than sorrow, and creating that dynamic is collective work. That's one of the metaphors that shapes my work and how I approach this work of community and belonging. I'm also a history nerd with a PhD in early Christian history. My doctoral research focused on how early Christian communities used metaphors of belonging to manage internal disagreements about, the good society. How are we supposed to live in the world, including conflicts over heresy and orthodoxy and how they enforced those decisions. As Ryan mentioned, I later helped build a religion and society program at Aspen, where we were building American religious pluralism. That is helping a diverse society navigate, again, competing definitions of the common good. In that work, I saw two recurring challenges for nonprofits. There was a strategic problem, that is, how do you work effectively in a community where people don't share the same vision? And secondly, a moral problem. That's what do you do when your own values point to conflicting solutions? I see that all the time in across faith organizations and also just in life. It's life is not for sissies. Today I'm focused on three big things and how they connect. We're going to talk about metaphor theory and cognitive linguistics, which is super fun. Metaphors of community belonging. I saw Jenny smirk at me, and it is fun. And competing visions and values of the good society today. What I want to show you, big picture, is that the way we talk about community, the kinds of metaphors that we use, directly shape who we include or exclude and the conflicts that you're navigating in your work. So I want to start with cognitive linguistics. Wow, my face is giant on this slide. Okay. So a metaphor is literally means a carrying over of meaning from one thing to another. Metaphors help us understand complex ideas by giving them a familiar shape. Root metaphors are simple ideas with lots of ways to call them to mind. And over time, some metaphors become so embedded in our language that we actually stop noticing them. I'm gonna list a couple here. The other thing about metaphors is that they actually structure our internal reality and constrain the way that we see the world. So once we use a metaphor to describe a situation, you then continue to perceive that situation through that lens of the metaphor, and you start acting based on that lens rather than the original objective situation. So the more we use a metaphor, the more it shapes and constrains our perception of reality and then how we react to it. So, for example, time is money. It's a metaphor. We talk about spending, saving, wasting, and investing time, even though time isn't a material resource. But because that metaphor is so ingrained, it actually shapes how we behave. It continues to shape our culture. Another one is argument is a war. We say, without thinking about it, we say, oh yeah, he shot down my arguments. Or her critiques were right on target. These are metaphors of war. And we all know what war is. In a war, you kill the other person before they kill you. Well, hopefully you make peace, but once that frame is activated in your head of war, that means we're more likely to escalate, defend, and attack. And that's not just verbally, but that can escalate into behavior as well. Again, metaphors don't just describe reality, they structure it. And again, once we have a metaphorical framing of a problem, we tend to solve the metaphor, not the problem. I'm going to give you a concrete example. In the 1950s in DC, where I live, actually in the neighborhood I'm sitting in now, urban planners described the southwest quadrant of the city as having a congenital disease, quote, congenital disease. So here's some photos of the Southwest neighborhood. This is a high school just down the street from where I'm sitting now. This is 4th Street, just about 4 or 5 blocks north of where I'm sitting now. Thriving, primarily Black and Jewish neighborhood in DC. So city planners describe these neighborhoods as slums having a congenital disease. And if something is congenitally diseased, there is no cure. It cannot be cured. So the solution became eradication. Almost the entirety of DC Southwest was bulldozed over the course of the course of the 1950s. If instead this neighborhood had been described as, let's say, a garden with uneven soil, the response, the solution to the problem laid out might be investment, care, cultivation, but that's not what happened. A metaphor was used and a problem was solved in the frame of that metaphor. Same place, same people, different metaphor, totally different outcome. The thing with metaphors is that if we can see them, we can question it. But if you can't see it, then you get stuck inside it. The British philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein put it this way. He said, a picture held us captive. We could not get outside it. for it lay in our language, and language seemed to repeat it to us inexorably. So I want, as we're thinking, as we're rolling along here, I want you to think about your own organization's core issue and think about what metaphors are you using in your work, explicitly or implicitly. What do those metaphors make possible and what do they rule out? So first, just figuring out how do you actually see the metaphors that have become so standard, so easy to use that we lose sight of them. So think about that as we keep going. In the meantime, I'm going to talk about belonging. Belonging is a central part of human experience. We are social. We are made to be social creatures. We have a central need to belong, and no two humans are identical. So that means every group faces this constant question: who are we? One of the most powerful ways humans have answered that question is through the social body metaphor, describing a community as a single physical body. This metaphor is everywhere across cultures and centuries. In the Rig Veda, I couldn't find a good image for this. The Rig Veda in ancient India, an ancient script from South Asia, uses body metaphors for social order. The ancient Greek political thought referred to the head of the polis, the head of state. If you've heard that phrase, that's body metaphor. The Prophet Muhammad used imagery of the community as a body, the ummah. And of course, Paul of Tarsus described the early church as the body of Christ. Paul he had been educated in Greek rhetoric, so he's pulling on these Greek ideas to describe the church as the body of Christ, and he uses that very consistently. We still use this body politic language today, including we still use the phrase head of state. Here's Leviathan, of course, as a ruler embodied literally by his people. We use the Latin word member, which means literally a limb. If you're a member of a gem or a member of a community, you're literally you're saying you're a limb, a finger, an earlobe, or a nose, or an eyeball. And the ancients talk about the body metaphor in this way, but that language is still embedded in our normal everyday speech. And again, I've already said, once we use a metaphor, it shapes how we think about everything else around us, even if we're not aware of it. And of course, we have too Ben Franklin's representation of the colonies cut apart from each other in this dead. Right? He's saying to survive, you have to stick together. You cut yourself off, you die. So this is a root metaphor of the social body. It's incredibly powerful, and it can create deep belonging. Each person is part of a whole. And to quote Paul, if one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one member is honored, every member rejoices with it. He's pulling, again, he's using that social body metaphor. But it can also justify exclusion. If something is a disease, it must be removed. St. Augustine of Hippo frequently argued that heresy was a gangrene. And in the ancient period, if you have gangrene, the limb has to come off or you will die. So he used the language of amputation to talk about what you do with heretics in society. And he's not just meaning about excommunication from the church. By his time, he died around 430. And there was also essentially a civil war between the group of Christians he affiliated with and another group that he believed were heretics. And they were doing terrible things against each other, truly. So the empire got involved. But what Augustine ended up doing was justifying the imperial force doing things like locking the other guys in their churches and setting them on fire to amputate the other. That's Augustine of Hippo. So these metaphors of exclusion, of heresy, of disease in the body are extremely powerful, because what you do to a disease, you would do to the person you've described in that way. Also, as another example, in 2015, then candidate Donald Trump said, Tremendous infectious disease is pouring across the border. That was in one of his first big speeches, if you remember that. He was talking about people, and he's now doing his best to remove those people. The metaphors really do justify. I don't mean that they do justify. I mean that cognitively, the use of a metaphor again sets you up to solve the problem that you've in the way that you've laid it out. Okay, so that's how the social body metaphor, which is one of the most powerful for belonging, can also be used to justify exclusion. For the ancient thinkers, while they understood the tension between the group and the individual, the group was the primary identity. It's always this tension between the individual bird here and the flock. But the ancients also really understood that individuals can't be cut off from society, that Aristotle famously says only gods and beasts live outside the city. To be outside of human community is to be unhuman. Marcus Aurelius, living 300 or 400 years later, and a Roman emperor, not a Greek philosopher, wrote that a person who separates themselves from society by acting antisocially cuts himself off, as though you were to cut off your own hand. That you do that to yourself if you act antisocially. And we know today, we know this. So the Greeks are intuiting this, right? And we know now that, for example, a loneliness epidemic is causing a spike in the suicide rate, that this need to belong, this need to be part of a group, part of a whole, is really fundamental to being human. And here's the tension. If society is one body, one group, one collective, it needs a shared vision of how to function. That means that disagreements about values and the shape of the good society also mean that you're in having disagreements about who belongs, who doesn't, and what to do about it. Let me say that again. Disagreements about values and about the good society become disagreements about who belongs, who doesn't, and what to do about it. It's also true that because we are social and we need other human beings, connection to other human beings to survive, when people feel excluded, they experience that as threat. And that triggers our fight or flight responses, turning into anger, outrage, and escalation. So again, simple use of a metaphor can get us embroiled into us versus them. You're trying to cut me out of society, that you're trying to make me not survive, and kicks up all of this emotional stuff. So every community is navigating competing definitions of the good society and boundaries of belonging all the time, basic human reality. And there's also this constant tension about getting the society right. We want to live right. We want to live right with God. If that's your orientation, you want to live right with your neighbors. If that's your orientation, you're balancing all of that stuff. So you're trying to do that right, and you don't really want to associate with people who aren't doing it right. And also, if you're too pure about this, you shrink your society down to where it becomes non-functioning or brittle, or just too small to manage in the complex world. So this ongoing tension fuels conflict throughout history. It's never going to stop fueling this conflict. This is just what it means to be human. So if metaphors shape how people understand belonging, and belonging shapes who's in and out, then communications isn't just messaging. It's how you're defining the boundaries of your community, who you work with, who you might work with, how you reach the folks that you're trying to reach, whoever those folks are in your work. Okay, so the same, not just the metaphors themselves, but the same ways that the metaphors of body politic push us to exclude are still driving how we respond to folks today. And I've written very nerdy papers where you can see more about this, how ideological excommunication works in all different kinds of spaces. But for example, here's some modern polarization and sort of modern cultural heresies and orthodoxies. On the right, figures like Russell Moore and David French were pushed out of core conservative communities despite theological alignment with other theological conservatives on most issues. So it was a cultural heresy. On the left, people cut each other off. Notice that language. Did you hear that? Cut each other off. There's a reason that language sounds that way. Cut each other off over positions on Israel-Palestine, racial justice, gender, abortion, all kinds of other purity concerns on the left. And you notice here that this is not polarization across left-right divide. This is the fragmentation within communities. So it gets the more it's like the harsher things get, the more things the more this happens within smaller and more insular communities. It never stops. Contributing to this doesn't make it go away. So each side on either end of this believes the other is not just wrong, but morally wrong about the good society. I don't want to take sides in any of this. This is just a reality. This is what's happening in the world. So again, this is all back to that familiar tension, getting the society right, and between getting the society right and making it so pure that it becomes really small and brittle. And nonprofits, of course, you don't sit outside this dynamic. You are actively shaping who belongs in your we through your messaging, partnerships, issue framing. And for faith-inspired nonprofits, you may be more grounded in your work than some secular organizations, but faith-inspired nonprofits are also viewed with suspicion, often viewed with suspicion. We can talk more about that later, by some in their community, not least because I think that grounding in a particular vision of the good society, explicitly or implicitly for other folks, calls up that, oh, well, you have a particular vision of the good society, and that means that I'm not in it. And so there's that tension for faith rooted organizations, that you have this deep well of tradition to ground you, and also everybody knows that you have an exclusive truth claim. So it's tough. Now I want to turn to the strategic question. How do you navigate competing definitions of the good society effectively? Well, there is no like getting it right all the time, right? But the big piece is that the most effective long-term approach is to build positive, pluralistic visions that include as many people as possible. And this is a basic truth. I'm in the middle of a research project right now about threats, how societies get out of an authoritarian framework. And this is one of the basic things: positive, pluralistic visions that include as many people as possible. Just standard, kind of basic level. But why is that? One of the things is that if you have, if say you're building policy, durable policy requires not just a narrow group that can get it passed right now, but broad support that's going to survive, the next time somebody gets to 51% on the other side, or the next election cycle. So the broader the support, the more durable. We also know that diverse input leads to better outcomes. And we don't just mean, all minoritized voices. We mean, no, really, we need all voices, all voices, all voices in at the tables creating, again, if you're talking about policy, creating policy, what does it mean to have the good society? Where are we going as a community? Diverse input, yeah, more diverse, more better. And of course, broad coalitions are more resilient. I will say this is getting harder the more polarized we are in the society, but the way to push back on it is to do it, is to do the different stuff. So practical communications. Oh yeah, I was supposed to click earlier. Sorry about that. Practical implications here means that you should focus as narrowly as you can, work on one issue or a tightly related set of issues. Avoid unnecessary ideological bundling. So don't take public positions on unrelated polarizing issues. I've seen this just mean that so many organizations who believe in the thing are unable to work to be effective in the issue where their primary concern is, because they're also genuinely concerned about lots of other things, and they can't not talk about it. And then what that means is they can't work with anybody who differs with them on any of those issues. And so their coalition shrinks. Expand your we intentionally. don't define your community in narrow political identity terms and separate issues. I meant to put this up there. Number 5, I should have actually connected to number 3. Talk bridgy. There's PACES, which is Philanthropy for Active Civic Engagement. They have a Civic Language Perceptions Project, which has tested words like pluralism, community, freedom, democracy, authoritarianism, racial justice, equity, all of a wide swath of language that feel across the American public in a large survey, 5,000 plus respondent survey. And so you're really seeing that democracy is not all that useful a term, actually, but community is. Community speaks to everybody. And so you can take the language that you already have and go find that report from PACE, and I can drop it in the chat in a minute, and check out, see how the words that you're using, are they coded right? Are they coded left? Do you need them to be coded right or left? Like who are you speaking to? How wide a group are you oriented toward? I've seen a lot of, this is one example, I've seen a ton of environmental organizations that have really just failed because of a progressive background, that they're sort of blind to the fact that there are also a lot of theological conservatives who are deeply committed to creation care. And so we've got lots of like progressive environmental organizations that can't work with creation care organizations because they can't get out of their own heads about all of the other issues that they also genuinely care about. But they're I don't want to use the phrase shooting themselves in the foot, but they're keeping themselves from reaching their goal by their inability to get outside their own heads on some of this stuff and to actually see that there's real shared desires. Okay. So I don't mean to say this isn't about appealing to everybody. It is about including everyone who shares your goal, even if they disagree elsewhere. Okay, if you're doing this work, you are going to land yourself in a moral challenge because it's hard, turns out, to work with folks who don't share your views on all the things. So you might, in fact, yourself be thinking, I can't work with those people, that violates my values. And that is a real thing. And remember that humans instinctively connect moral vision with belonging, and the other end of belonging is exclusion. That's the tension. So what happens when your own values conflict? And I think this is you can name this as your personal values, your organizational values, and then public. How do you work across values? So I want to start with a light example. This is a personal values conflict of mine. I really love salted caramel brownies. I also love not having to buy a new wardrobe every so frequently. So that is a personal values conflict in my life. These salted caramel brownies bring me a lot of joy. And also, so that, just to start off with something light, but a more serious example is I want to talk about the AME Church. So the AME Church was founded, as you all probably know, you all know more about this than most folks I talk to. AME Church was founded by free Black Americans in the late 18th century. It has been a powerful force, probably one of the most powerful forces for racial justice in the country. And it's just been an amazing group of folks who took their own agency and did something with it in the world. It's the AME. In 2024, the AME Church again voted to disallow same-sex marriage. So if I consider partnership with the AME, I face a real conflict. And this is my personal values, not any values I'm expecting anyone else to hold. So I value racial justice and personal and community agency that the AME Church is amazing at. And I want them to have their own agency in both their personal and their community lives. it also happens that as a particular human, I value marriage equality for same-sex loving couples. So now if a situation comes up in which I have the opportunity to work with the AME Church, that puts me into a values conflict. What do I do? And I've seen in my work at Aspen, I saw this over and over and over again that organizations in a situation like this, where this is just a situation of life, life happens, you get something comes up where you're going to have to make a choice that there is no good, perfect choice. And I've seen so many organizations just walk away, but that doesn't eliminate the conflict. It lets the situation choose which of your values gets violated. I'm not sure that's helping anything. So avoiding values conflict doesn't make it disappear. And once that situation exists, any path forward involves a trade-off. So then the work becomes naming the conflict, acknowledging competing visions of the good. And then this is a religious freedom issue too, acknowledging other folks' access to the same religious freedom foundation to live their own lives, to argue for their own views in the public sphere, right? And then, of course, working through the values conflict openly and honestly. And that has to happen internally. If you're a leader, you have to do it yourself. You have to do that within your own organization with this naming conflict and acknowledging the competing visions of the good, like just saying out loud, hey, if this is the conflict that you would be in, like, I really value the AME and the history of their community and the amazing work that they've done and continue to do, and I value their agency to make their decisions. And I don't agree with them on this other issue, but I'd like to work with them, and how can we do that? So you have to have that internal conversation. And then, of course, there's the public between potential partners and in public communication. There's all this like risk management stuff too, right? So I want to come back around to say that every time you communicate, you're defining who belongs. And that say again that y'all are all, as nonprofits, navigating competing visions of the good society while you're advancing your own. Your strategy and your communications around that, you're defining who's in and out, who's possible. And the broader you can make your vision across all kinds of differences, race, ideology, religion, the larger your we. The larger your we, the more effective your work will be over time. That was a lot, and I'm eager to hear what y'all think and um, have questions for me or tell me you disagree with me because I want to hear that too. Any of that stuff I'll stop share.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ralph. That was absolutely fascinating. And I invite anybody to put their questions in the chat. Before we get to the questions from everybody else, I have a couple questions of my own, if I may. Um, the very first one is you spent the first half of your presentation talking about different metaphors,
Mhm.
and how these metaphors define how we think and how we react and how we interact a lot of times, right? And then the very last points you were making was about how to work with others despite potential conflict, right? Like, um, you name the conflict, you acknowledge your competing views, you allow others the freedom. Do you have a metaphor that would help us think about that solution at the end? Um,
Yeah.
what would that metaphor be like? How can we train our minds to think differently? What would be a good metaphor to think about when we look at that, working despite differences?
Yeah, for sure. I actually think the social body metaphor, using it in a positive way, I really do think that the social body metaphor is one of the most powerful metaphors for inclusion. And as I also said, it's extremely powerful for exclusion also. So you have to be aware of it as you use it. Um, but that Pauline language, it's not just Pauline, he was drawing on a long history of a specific field of rhetoric around we are one body. What hurts you hurts me. And that acknowledgement that, especially when we get into some of the cultural war stuff around rights, it's very focused on specific policy. Oh, I want this to be this way. I want to have this right. I want to have that. I want to be able to do. I want to be free from. Um, but there's a way that, especially for faith-based folks, coming at this in the frame of mind of the golden rule and the frame of we are in this together, that we depend on one another, which the social body pulls on all of that stuff. If you're using that social body language, it's going to pull on all of that. We are in this together. If you get hurt, I get hurt, kind of ideas, because again, it's both a root metaphor and it's deeply embedded into our language. And so when you use it, you're pulling on all those strings at the same time without even having to do all that work. So it's very powerful.
The next question I had, uh, and again, feel free, everybody else, to put your questions in the chat. But we are members of the Religion Communicators Council, right? And as you were talking, I was thinking about some of the exclusionary language that we use just within our faiths, because we do have this conviction of, you know, we belong to a religious tradition because it resonates with us, right? More so than any other one does. But lots of times we may use language, even if it's something as simple as, say, Jew and Gentile, that's still dividing us up into two groups, right?
Yeah.
Um, so how can we speak honestly from our own convictions while still inviting genuine pluralism and dialogue in our interactions with other people?
One of the, as I say, in faith-inspired nonprofits have this incredible well of tradition and values and stories that you can pull on. And one of the things that is both specific to many different traditions, it's very specific within traditions, and it is almost entirely universal across theist traditions, is that the belief that all humans are made in the image of God. And so that does not, you are not trying to reduce down to the common denominator. That actually it doesn't get you very far. But it does root you deeply in your own traditions and beliefs. And to do that, you've got to do that with honesty. And to say, here's my work on food pantries. I don't know, picking a thing. And I do that work because I believe that all people are created in the image of God, and every image bearer deserves safe and healthy food, full stop. And you can use that as a frame, even if you're also going to say, all right, and I'm going to consider working with this other group whose views do not align with mine on a variety of theological issues and a variety of social issues. But if you can name openly, okay, here is the thing where we agree on food security issue, then we're going to work closely with that. And I think I was talking about that example with the AME church. To be able to say in an example like that, to say both internally as an organization and with that partnership, I value this about your organization. I share that with you. I want you to continue to be able to make this decision for yourself, even though it is different from what I would do for myself. That's a little piece of that golden rule right there. And gets down to the religious freedom, shared rights frameworks. Then you can say all of those things clearly. Like, I'm going to continue to disagree. I'm not trying to change your mind about this. I'm not asking you to try to change my mind about this. We can set it aside. And maybe I'll see you on the other side, on opposite sides of a protest one day. But for here and now, we share this value. And I think even acknowledging that, like, yeah, are even going to continue to contest over this other thing, and that's okay.
So you talked about the bundling of values, right? As not necessarily being helpful.
Yeah,
And it would seem to me that that bundling of values, that bundling of a person or an organization is kind of what might lead to this cancel culture, so to say, that people can't separate this one piece of a person's work with everything else. And so
yeah,
therefore they get canceled or whatever. What would be your suggestions on how to overcome that? Or are there things that if this is so bad, we have to ignore everything else? For a little bit of context, I just recently listened to a really fascinating podcast series on Roald Dahl, beloved children's book author. Movies have been made of his work, but he was also an anti-Semite. And so it was a couple of the episodes were looking at, can we balance those two things? Can we read his work? And what does that say about us if we do, considering his anti-Semitism?
yeah,
So what would be your advice in that or any situation?
yeah. I think the first one, yes, you're right. The values bundling thing does get us into a cancel culture situation on both the right and the left. I don't think this is just a left issue. Um, I could get nerdy again about contagion within the body, where that comes from.
You can continue
Contagion.
that metaphor, right?
Yes, and the SBC, for example, did use that metaphor when they were removing Russell Moore. So it is present. Um, and you hear the same metaphor on the left also in cancel culture spaces. So the question is like, are there things that supersede all of this other stuff? Well, yes. And of course it's personal. How far can you go? There's a big question that this gets to one of the other areas that I work in, which is bridging, that is connecting people, specifically connecting people across difference. Um, and in that space, there's a lot of people who are trying to bridge all the way from the far left to the far right. And that's not it's not particularly useful. And most of us are bridging only, one or two steps in either way. Um, but there's still, like, even within the bridging space, there's well, I don't think I could work with them. I don't think you should go that far. You got to cut them off. You can't trust those folks over there. They're not, playing fair or whatever. Um, I was just talking to a scholar the other day we were talking about this, and she was like, listen, even in bridging isn't everywhere else, you got to pick a lane. How far is it? Can you as an individual go? Where are your lines? And you have to draw those for yourself, really, to figure out what those lines are. I mean, if someone it partly like the historical stuff is really hard because all humans were pretty terrible in the past, and we try to cut off from everything that was terrible in the past. We have very little to draw on, frankly. And even folks go, well, Jesus was great, man. Like, okay, well, there's a lot of Christians between now and then who messed that up for us. So how do we do that? So for me personally, a lot of the historical stuff is like, okay, state the bad thing. Yeah, that's terrible. I'm not doing that. And we're gonna use what's good there. That's my personal line. That might be different today with someone today. Am I gonna work with somebody who does like goes this far? I don't know.
But I like what you said that bridging is like you're bridging one or two steps in either direction. You're not necessarily bridging to the polar opposite, right?
Right,
And nor do you have to. Um,
right.
and I really liked what you said about, you have to decide how far you're bridging, right?
That's
Based
exactly right.
based on your own work and your own comfort level, I guess. One final question that I have is that, as the RCC, some of us represent large organizations, but some of us represent pretty small organizations, right? In fact, many of us work with limited capacity, small teams, part-time roles. In the last 12 years that I've been involved with the RCC, I've seen a number of positions and communications get reduced because of the fact that,
Yeah.
there's budget cuts everywhere, right? So, what is one small, realistic, cost-effective step that all of us could take this month to start telling better stories of belonging?
Yeah. I am a huge fan of this pace. Let me see if I can find that right now. This pace document, How to Talk Bridgie. It's really great. It's easy to use. It's accessible. And it can help you see where your own language is coming across in a coded left-right way, even when you're not trying to, if you're trying to talk Bridgie, but we're also wrapped up in our own communities and our ways of speaking that we don't see when we are speaking in a way um, that feels coded to somebody else. And so I'm gonna give you this in the chat. This is pacefunders.org/language. And every now and again, every couple of years, they update this thing. So this is a relatively new version, just came out a few months ago. Um, but it's just a great ongoing resource. And the other thing that I would do that costs nothing at all is to look at your own writing and see what kinds of metaphors you're using. Think about the metaphors that you're using. Um, like if you say this, I don't know how anyone could. Well, people do. And you just said that people who go that far are not anyone. That's the metaphorical frame you end up with. And it's so easy to do. It's so easy to just say something that makes somebody else not a human being. It's very easy to get drawn into that. Um, yeah.
And we have one question from in the chat box right now. Are intentionally created metaphors work? So if we work to watch our words, does that help us move out of some of the more negative metaphors and phrasing? Like,
Mm.
I think the question is work is the metaphor? I'm trying to
Like, does it mean do intentionally created metaphors work? Or is
Yes.
it like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So like, or do they come across as like too slick, too slogany, too car salesman-y? It's like if we're trying to watch our language,
okay.
how do we do it so that it sounds authentic still and not too manufactured?
Got it, got it, got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I think metaphors are so tricky to use because I think one of the first the you have to be really careful not to mix your metaphors, right? But it's also like a constant thing. Um, I would say that using a metaphor that's recognizable is very easily draws on the ways that those metaphors are already embedded in our language. Again, the social body metaphor is just everywhere. It's very, very easy to pull on those strings and do so in a powerful way. Because it's so easy, you have to look out for a little bit. Like, for example, the word unanimous means in Latin one mind. It is drawing on the social body metaphor of what the in late antiquity the bishops' councils would like kick each other out and say you don't agree with us, go, leave, and then they'd say we've made a unanimous statement. Like, okay, y'all. So again, using the power of the social body metaphor to explicitly exclude those who don't agree. So it can be really easy to do that. Um, I mean, any kind of carrying over of metaphor of meaning from one to another can help us understand our super complex world. Um, I find that complex metaphors are, unless they're already embedded, this is a little bit, if they're already deeply embedded to language, it takes work to make them visible. If they're not already deeply embedded in language, people don't know what the heck they mean. So there's a little bit of a challenge with that. You're on mute. You're on mute, Ryan.
Hey, years of this, and it still happens.
Same.
If there are no more questions from our speakers or from our audience, um, I will just wrap it up real quick. I really, really appreciated everything you had to say. To give you a metaphor, it was excellent food for thought. Um, and it just gave me a lot to think about, a lot to think about my language, a lot to think about how I can do this better in my sphere of influence. And so I really thank you for your time today, Dr. Ralph. For those of you who are members of the RCC or not members of the RCC, our upcoming convention in April in Cincinnati will be the place to be. Urge you to look up for that, sign up for it, and attend. It will be the third week of April. RCreligioncommunicators.org is the website to go to. But thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Ralph. Thank you for all of your insights. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Have a fantastic day, everybody.
You too.
Doctor,
Oh,
could I ask you a question real quick?
sure. Fine by me.
I am going to be putting on a seminar, and I have brought a pastor from the UU's, Universalist Unitarian. But somebody said that, our sheriff for Orange County would like to come and speak. And I said to him, and I printed it out, and I said, and the other speaker is going to be the Sheriff Barnes. Like, I know UU's, I don't know UU's very well, but I'm trying to get to know them. But what do you think should I say to Sheriff Barnes to speak on? Like, it's about conflict. It is about managing conflict, getting creative ideas about conflict. It's like peace solutions. Where is the darn thing? It's about peaceful solutions, creative, peaceful solutions. What do you think?
I honestly, if both of those folks are invited to talk about creative, peaceful solutions, they probably have the background to be able to say, I'm interested in somebody else's point of view. I said earlier, if you use the phrase, I don't know how anybody could. Well, maybe you should ask the question and find out. And if you can come at work with curiosity, that's a piece from the bridging world, not from the metaphor world, but to come with curiosity. And most folks do. I don't know if you've got from the UUA. I've spent a long time in that community myself. There's lots of great folks with the UUs.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you once again, Dr. Ralph.
Of course, it's a great pleasure. Take good care.
Bye.